Tokyo, 1978. A receiver goes on sale that is too big to be built as one object. It has to be made in two pieces, the tuner and preamplifier in one case, the power amplifier in another, with a fan inside it, because the heat it makes cannot get out on its own. It is rated at 300 watts per channel. It is called the G33000. It costs about $1,900, and it is bigger than anything Pioneer or Marantz has put on a shelf. The company that built it is called Sansui, and by the time enough of them reach the shops, almost nobody wants one. This is the story of Sansui, and it is the fourth funeral of this season, but it is not the fourth version of the same funeral. Marantz refused to compromise and was destroyed for it. Avery Fisher compromised perfectly, sold at the right moment, and lost his name anyway. Pioneer won the largest fight the industry ever had, twice, and the category evaporated underneath it both times. Each of those companies made a decision and then lived inside it. Sansui is the first one that never got to decide. Its ending was written by somebody who was not interested in audio at all, and who is now a convicted thief. Start with the name, because the name is the design brief. Sansui is written with two characters that mean mountain and water. It is the Japanese term for the landscape painting tradition that came out of China. Ink on paper, and the company's own account of its aesthetic points back to it. Strength and simplicity, nothing decorative. Remember it when you look at the machines. The man who chose it is Kosaku Kikuchi, and he founds the company for a reason that is unusually specific. Before and during the war, he works for a radio parts distributor in Tokyo, and what he handles all day is bad. So in December 1944, in Yoyogi in Tokyo, with the war still on, he starts making them himself. Company histories record his first product as a power transformer. Hold on to that, because it is the ending. A transformer is the least romantic object in audio. Nobody puts one on a shelf. It is iron and copper wire, hidden inside the box. And it is the most expensive thing to do properly, and the easiest in the world to cheapen, because the customer will never see it. Kikuchi's stated position was that it was better to build the higher quality product and charge more for it. He founded the company on the component nobody looks at. He incorporates formally as Sansui Electric in Tokyo in June 1947. By 1954, the company is selling tube amplifier kits and finished amplifiers. By 1958, it has stereo tube preamplifiers and power amplifiers of its own. And in the mid-1960s, it makes the object that people still argue about. The AU-111 is an integrated amplifier built around 6L6GC output tubes, rated at 40 watts per channel, and at the heart of it is a Sansui output transformer, the SW50, made in-house. 40 watts is not a large number even in 1965. It was never the point. The point was what those 40 watts were made of. Look at the front of it, though, because this is where Sansui separates from everybody in this season so far. The faceplate is matte black with gold-plated knobs. In the years when Pioneer was inventing what collectors now call the silver era, brushed aluminum and a wide backlit dial, Sansui's amplifiers went the other way and stayed there. A black panel with white lettering for 20 years. Its own receivers wore the same brushed aluminum as everybody else's, and that is the point. The amplifier was the thing that announced itself. In a shop full of silver faces, the black one was a Sansui, and it still is. Now, the mistake, and it is a real one, because this company did make decisions before the decisions were taken away from it. In 1971, Sansui launches a quadraphonic synthesizer called the QS-1 and commits hard to 4-channel sound. It develops its own matrix system for pulling 4 channels off an ordinary record, refines it into what it calls variomatrix, and builds a line of receivers around it. The best of them is the QRX 9001 from the second half of the 1970s. A walnut veneered receiver with 4 power meters across the front, 4 channels of 60 watts, or 120 watts a side used as an ordinary stereo. It weighs about 23 kilograms, and it is, by common consent among the people who collect these things, the finest quadraphonic receiver anybody built. Quadraphonic sound failed completely. There were 3 incompatible formats fighting each other. The records were scarce, and the public looked at buying 2 more speakers and 2 more channels of amplification and said no. Sansui built the best hardware for a format the market rejected outright. That was a decision, and it went wrong. Then comes the war everybody remembers. Through the 1970s, the Japanese industry competes on one number, watts per channel, printed on the front of the box. In 1978, Pioneer publishes the specification for the SX 1980 at 270 watts a side, and the argument is supposed to be over. Sansui's answer is the G series. The G22000 at 220 watts a channel, and above it, the G33000 at 300, the one from the beginning of this story, in 2 boxes with a fan. Sansui called them pure power receivers. On paper, it beat the SX 1980. In the shops, it did almost nothing, because it arrived in 1979 at about $1,900, into a market that had already stopped caring. Serious listeners were buying separates. Everybody else was about to buy a compact disc player. You can see how hard the company was pressing, because it is in the public record in Washington. Between the end of 1974 and the middle of 1977, Sansui filed 22 design patents in the United States on the appearance of its products. 5 are for a combined amplifier and tuner, which is to say a receiver. 4 more are amplifiers, 2 tuners, 2 tape decks, 3 record players, 2 speakers, 2 sets of headphones. That is not a company drifting. That is a company redesigning its entire catalog at once, in the 2.5 years immediately before the market moved. One more thing about the machines, because it explains why the name still carries. The AU717, sold from about 1977, is rated at 85 watts per channel, and owners who have measured them will tell you they generally do rather more than that. Sansui rated conservatively. In an industry that had spent 5 years fighting over a printed number, the company from the transformer business kept quietly delivering more than it claimed. That is why the collectors are loyal. And none of it saves the company, because what happens next has nothing to do with hi-fi. By the middle of the 1980s, Sansui is losing ground to Sony, to Pioneer, to Matsushita's Technics. The yen strengthens sharply against the dollar, which is close to fatal for a company that exports carefully built, expensive objects. Around 1988, it starts disappearing from the United States. By 1989, the accumulated losses on the books are around 13.8 billion yen. On Friday, the 27th of October, 1989, a British conglomerate called Polly Peck International agrees to buy control of Sansui Electric. It takes 35 million newly issued shares for 15.6 billion yen, about $110 million, and with them, management. It is reported at the time as one of the first foreign takeovers of a major Japanese company listed on the Tokyo Stock Exchange, and Wikipedia records the stake as 51%. It is front-page news in the Japanese evening papers that day, and the reason it is news is the direction of travel. Japanese companies were the buyers in these stories, not the merchandise. Sansui's president, Ryosuke Ito, says publicly that he expects the tie-up to get the restructuring on track. So, who bought them? Polly Peck was Asil Nadir's company. It had begun in fruit packing and shipping out of northern Cyprus, and grown into one of the great stock market stories of 1980s Britain. A conglomerate whose shares rose so far and so fast that it entered the FTSE 100. It knew nothing about audio. It was not a rival or a distributor moving upstream. Nobody at Sansui chose this partner on the merits of the machines, because the machines were not what the deal was about. Polly Peck lasted 11 more months. On the 20th of September 1990, the Serious Fraud Office raided its offices, and trading in its shares was suspended the same day. By the end of October, it was in provisional liquidation. In 1991, it collapsed, with debts of around £1.3 billion. Asil Nadir fled to northern Cyprus in 1993 and stayed there for 17 years. He came back to Britain on the 26th of August 2010, stood trial, and on the 22nd of August 2012 was convicted on 10 counts of theft, totaling nearly £29 million. He was sentenced to 10 years. Sansui never recovers. Its majority owner did not merely fail, it detonated 11 months in and took the restructuring with it. From there, the story is a name being handed along. In the late 1990s, Grande Holdings acquires the rights to license the Sansui name outside Japan. The headquarters at Shin, Yokohama closes in 2001. Japanese production of the high-end amplifiers ends somewhere between 2002 and 2005. The date is genuinely not settled, and anyone who gives you a firm one is guessing. The company is generally recorded as going out of business in 2014. Today, the name belongs to Doshisha inside Japan and Nimble Holdings of Hong Kong outside it, and it appears mostly on televisions. But go back to 1999, when the company is a licensing arrangement with the headquarters about to close. What Sansui chose to build, one last time, was the AU-111, the tube amplifier from 1965, black faceplate, gold knobs, 4 output tubes, and the in-house output transformer. 55 years after Kikuchi started winding transformers in Yoyogi because the ones he was being sold were not good enough, the last thing the company put its name on was the thing he had started with. The transformer outlived the corporation. Marantz refused to compromise. Fisher compromised and sold. Pioneer won and won again. Sansui was never asked. It built the best hardware for a format the public rejected. It built a 300-watt receiver for a war that ended while it was in the warehouse. And then it lost its independence to a man who was interested in it only as a line on a balance sheet, and who is now most famous for stealing. Somewhere tonight, there is a G33000 switched on. 2 boxes, a fan turning quietly in the lower one. 300 watts aside that nobody in a house has ever needed. Brushed aluminium, walnut at the sides, mountain and water. Every watt it claims is there, and a few more that it never claimed, because that was the house rule from a man who started out disgusted by other people's parts. The company that made it did not lose an argument about sound. It just happened to be owned by the wrong person on the wrong Thursday in September. Every week, another giant. Subscribe, because the next one might be gathering dust in your attic.